Welcome to the Get Your Act Together podcast. I am your host, Kelly Reynolds, and today I have a fantastic guest for you. Her name is Christina. Christina, welcome.
Thank you, Kelly. I am so excited to be here and talking to your audience today. These are my people, and I am ready to get them hyped up about getting super visible in 2023 and how we can do that.
All right, so tell everyone who you are, where you work, what do you do?
What do I do? Who am I? My name is Christina Lenkowski, and I run an agency called Publicity by Christina, and we do podcast pitching. So the work that we do for our clients is we actually work with what we call under-recognized entrepreneurs. So for us, that's women, members of the LGBTQ community, members of the BIPOC community, and neurodiverse entrepreneurs. I'm a special needs mama myself, so I absolutely love to see these entrepreneurs out here crushing it in the way that works for them. And we get them booked on podcasts that are full of their ideal customers. So what we like to say is we help our clients go from best kept secret to go-to expert by raising their voice on other people's platforms.
I love it. I love it. This is a lot of worlds converging. We just had Anna Natkins on our the podcast on a couple episodes ago, who is working with neurodivergent business owners on
Love it.
It's like,
yeah,
lots of overlap here.
I love it. I love it. I think people are really feeling more comfortable with the way that their mind works, feeling like they're able to do things in different ways. And so I just love to see people talking about it a lot more and showing the ways that you could be successful aside from like, this is the way it has to be done. Step 1, 2, 3, XYZ.
Yeah, I love it. I think that's one of the best parts about being an entrepreneur, being able to work, especially remotely, so much easier to like include your life and who you are instead of having to just check in, check out with some company that makes all the rules.
100%. The nice thing about being remote and the nice thing about that is you really do get to kind of step into yourself and figure out how you actually work. Like, I don't know about for most of your listeners, I'm guessing this is probably true, but we worked for other people for so long that you were just doing what worked for them, right? How they had it set up and the schedule that they worked on. And so to be able to say, like, for instance, like, okay, I'm going to go on a walk every morning, which means I don't start until 9:15 a.m. Right? Like, to be able to do that stuff is such a game changer and allows us to figure out things that we might not have even known about ourselves before we became an entrepreneur.
Yeah. I mean, the ability to, like, when everything is too much and it's too stressful, to like go out on a paddleboard and put my phone on airplane mode and like check out for an hour.
Yeah.
Like, I could never do that if I was in corporate.
No. And I think about that all the time. And we all probably have those thoughts where some days you're like, I'm just going to burn this whole thing down. Like, you have days where you're like, you're like, I am done. Like, whatever. And then I think to myself, like, well, A, I really like what I do, but B, like, where would you have this flexibility? Where would you have this freedom? Like, it doesn't really exist when you're working for somebody else. And so, to remind myself sometimes that there's incredible privilege in what I do and to be thankful for that and know that there's going to be days that are still going to be hard.
Yeah. And I think that's also a motivating factor when the days are hard, because I'm not going to go back to corporate. Like, well, what are you going to do? You're going to go back to Wall Street? Like, no, no, I'm
no,
not.
Thank you. Yeah.
I'm going to stay right here and figure this out. Let's go figure this out.
Exactly. I love that. It's so true.
I'm super excited about podcast pitching because obviously I have a podcast and I get pitches.
Yes.
So I have opinions on that side of it. But I also I haven't been on a lot of other podcasts lately because I run out of time, and I'm guessing that you're going to have an opinion on that because it's a lot to pitch other podcasts, to find other podcasts you want to get on. So talk to me about podcast pitching and what you guys do. Like, where do I start? All the things, I guess. I'm asking all the things.
Good stuff. All that type of good stuff. I love it. So basically, I talked about what I did, but there's a little bit about what we do that comes from my background. So I have worked in PR and marketing for over 15 years. So for me, I went to school, all that type of good stuff. And then I kind of stumbled into the public relations world. I had a journalism degree and stuff like that, but I was kind of like, I don't know that I really wanted to do this. And so for me, I kind of found PR, public relations was a really good fit for me. I could still write, but I could be really social. And for me, like as an extrovert, like that's what I really love to do. And so I've done PR marketing for, big companies, Cirque du Soleil, Dark Horse Comics, all that type of good stuff, down to small, individual small companies. And podcasts, out of all the different types of PR I've done, and I've done it all, TV, radio, print, all that type of good stuff, to me is the most effective form of publicity. And the reason for that is you really get to tell your story. You really get to help people. And we were talking earlier about just being who you are, showing your true self. And that really, really motivates other people to figure out that in their own life, or maybe help them figure out some kind of issue. And the other thing that you get to do, and I should say, by being able to tell your story, in addition to motivating people, you shorten your sales funnel like crazy. When someone hears me on a podcast and then they book a call with me, I know that they are 90% of the way there. We need to hop on a call. We need to talk about what might make the most sense for them, but they are pretty much ready to go. They have trust in me. They like me. They like what I've had to say. And they're ready to move forward, really. And so that's one thing that I really love about it. The other thing that I really love about it is that, like all those other types of publicity that I mentioned, you actually get to direct people exactly where you want them to go. So at the end of this podcast interview, Kelly's going to say to me, all right, so how can people find out more about you? And I'm going to tell people exactly where to do that. When I'm on a TV show, when I'm featured in a magazine, not featured, when I'm, maybe mentioned in a magazine, right? There's no call to action on that. There's nothing there other than my name. And so that's one thing that I love about podcasts, is you really get to say to people, like, this is exactly where you can find me. Maybe I have some kind of download that you can get a hold of, or you can come find me on social media, whatever. But there's a lot more of actually asking people to come and find you. And I think that that's such an important thing that is lacking in all those other types of publicity or PR work. So all this to say that I niche down completely into podcasts in 2020. It's the only type of PR work that we do. And what we do is we get our clients booked on shows. You mentioned, not having the time to really be a guest because it takes a lot of time to pitch. And that's exactly what we do. So we take our clients, we work with them at the beginning to be like, okay, what are the topics that you want to talk about? Where is it that you want to be driving people? Who is that ideal audience for you? And then we pitch. So we spend the next multiple months pitching, and getting our clients booked on shows. And we actually offer, this is really unique to the PR world, but we offer a guarantee. So when I worked for all those agencies for many, many years, one thing that drove me insane was the fact that we could never give any kind of guarantee. And to be fair, it is different. Other types of PR are different. I can't guarantee a TV spot. I can't guarantee these other things. They're just not going to happen. But for me, when I started this agency, I was like, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it in the way that works for me, to what we spoke about earlier. And for me, it was really, really important to give a guarantee, because a lot of people start to work in the PR world. Their expectation is very different than the reality of what might happen. And so like a lot of times if someone's worked with a PR agency, I'll hear that a lot. They'll be like, well, I worked with a PR agency, but they didn't really do a whole lot for me, or this didn't really happen the way that I wanted it to happen. And I hate that feeling. I do not want people to have that feeling. So we have that guarantee from the get-go that's like, if you work with us for 6 months, if you work with us for 12 months, this is the guaranteed amount of shows that we're going to get you on that are full of your ideal customer. And if that means we have to pitch more, that means that we have to pitch more. But that's on us. And I just think that is why we have such a high customer satisfaction, because our clients expect what's going to happen during our time working together, and then we deliver or over deliver on that.
I love all of that. And I definitely agree that podcast is such a thing that you have so much more control over what you're saying and what you're asking. Like I can come on here and say what happened to me yesterday and how it can help you, because I think that it's going to help a lot of people. Like I'm not selling anything. I'm like, I had a really crappy day and I figured something out and I want to help you on it.
Yeah.
And I will say, especially in the beginning when it was like my mom listening.
Moms are the best.
The podcast wasn't as much about like ratings or getting a billion listeners. It was more like if people came to want to talk to me or maybe work with me, they would go listen to the podcast. They heard about me. They heard how I talked, what I talked about, my experience. Like it was like social proof to show things about me. So by the time, like you were saying, by the time they got to a discovery call, they'd already listened to a couple podcasts. They already kind of heard me. They'd already heard what I had to say. So they were like, oh no, I've heard you already. I know you're the kind of person.
I don't need the whole spiel. Yeah.
Right. And I bet there's other people who are like, she's a lot. I don't want to work with her. And that's fine, because then it weeds all those people out, because then you're saving some discovery calls, right? For people that definitely don't want to work with me anyway.
Exactly. And so I think that right there that you just said is the important. You weed out the people that would not be interested in working with you. And that's okay.
Yeah.
Not everyone wants to work with me. That's all right. I'm okay with that. I want to work with people that want to work with me and my team. Yeah. Right. So I love that you said that. I think it's so true for just that shortening of the sales funnel alone is such a huge part. When you go on, this is no knock to other kinds of PR, but when you go on TV, you're probably going to be there for 30 seconds, 1 minute. When you get, maybe you get quoted in a magazine, someone's just looking at that for a second, a minute, 2 minutes, whatever. This is where you really get the opportunity, 20, 30, 40 minutes to really talk with someone and people to really hear what it is you have to say.
And there's also this back catalog, right? We're well over 100 episodes now. So someone could go back and listen to all of that.
I regularly binge podcasts I love.
Right.
Yes.
So do I. Like, especially if you find out about a new one and then you're like, I love this. And then you go back to the whole thing. So that content lives there. It's not like a post on Instagram that kind of just floats to the end.
Yes. Or that was one thing that I was very like, Clubhouse had its moment, like, a year or two ago or whatever. And it's not at all that I thought Clubhouse was bad in any way, shape, or form, but I was like, this doesn't live on. So you're going to do this. And then if someone wasn't there at that exact moment, they're not going to hear it. That's one of the fantastic things about podcasts is that they live in perpetuity. So this is something that you're going to be able to use over and over and over again. And for me, I'm all about that working smarter, not harder. So if I'm doing the work, I want to be able to have it be there for, a long time for people to be able to do it. And that's one of the beautiful things about podcasts that people don't really realize. When you're a guest on a podcast, share that shit over and over. And like, this is one thing that just drives me bonkers is when someone's a guest on a podcast, they hit end on Zoom and then never do they think about that podcast again or use that podcast again. And it just makes no sense to me because you have it there. It's there for you to use. We have one of our clients and he's so good about sharing his podcast like again and again and again, even months later, and by him doing that, he's been able to get clients, been able to get all these things like on LinkedIn because he keeps continually sharing the podcast that he's been on, even though it might have been 3 months ago, 6 months ago. It doesn't really matter. If the content is what someone's looking to listen to, if it's still relevant content, then it's still going to be of interest to people to hear what you have to say.
Yeah. And I mean, we have been terrible about this over the years as well, because, work and all this kind of stuff. And that's the big change in 2023 is being much more focused on like more content and like being able to just use what we already have. So I would do the podcast and I'd say, hey, the podcast is up. And then I really wouldn't talk about it very much. And being able to like take clips out, people love that. People love to see like that small bite-sized stuff, share it all over the place. And then the people that end up sharing that as well, like the guests that share, I end up having now relationships with them. Now we're linked in those things. Now the algorithm says, oh, you guys know each other. Now I see more things. They see more of my things, like all that kind of stuff. So like that networking, even by algorithm, is amazing.
Yes, 100%. And I love that you just said that about the relationship with the guest and the host, because that is something that people overlook a lot as well. And I think that is such an opportunity for leverage. Being a guest on a podcast, like, let me just be clear for everyone. Like, I think this is how people think it works. Okay, I'm going to pitch. They're going to obviously accept it. And then I will be a guest on the show. Millions of people come to me and give me money. Like, that's not really how this works. Okay. Yeah. So how this works more so is you're going to pitch, and hopefully you're pitching at a really high level, and we can get into some of that stuff in a little bit, but you're pitching, hopefully that gets accepted. If it is accepted, you're going to be a guest on the show. People are going to listen to that. You may get, some people booking discovery calls, get people following you on socials, all that type of good stuff. But the way that you're really going to leverage it is that relationship with the host, meaning that you are able to say to them like, hey, how can I help you? How can we help each other? Right? We've had an actual conversation now. This isn't just like, oh, we follow each other on socials. No, me and Kelly now, we were even talking for 20 minutes before we hopped on this, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
You have a relationship there with that person. That's someone that, if it makes sense, you can become referral partners. You can, you can leverage this relationship in different ways. The other thing is that utilization of content, like we just spoke about, over and over and over again. So being a guest on a podcast isn't just about you being on the actual podcast, it airing, and then that being you done with it. There are all these different things that should be leveraged as a part of that work. And that's where you're really going to see it come into play. And the analogy that I always like to give is that perpetuity, that was just me saying a word that began with P. Podcasts are, it's like I used it once. And so now I'm like, now you just,
it's a good word. It's a good word.
I'm like, I was going to say it over and over again. The thing about podcasts or visibility really that I like to say is that visibility is a lot like ice. And what I mean by that is, ice freezes at 32 degrees for us here in the US, 0 degrees for everywhere else in the world. But before that happens, all this stuff is happening under the surface that we don't see, right? All these things are going on. We don't see it until it freezes solid. And that's a lot of how I look at visibility and publicity as well. You are going to get on all these different shows. You're going to show up in all these different places. Being a guest on podcasts is not showing up one time. It is not showing up 2 times. It is showing up over and over and over again. Some of those podcasts you're really going to see hits from. You're going to see people following you, booking discovery calls, etc. Some of them you might not see as much leverage from. That doesn't mean that it's a waste of your time. It just means that you have to be showing up in all these different places, and then boom, that ice is going to freeze, meaning you will become the expert in what it is that you do because you showed up over and over and over again consistently. And that is what we see with our clients. That is why with our clients, when they work with us for a year, we're booking them on 24 podcasts that are full of their ideal customers. Because that's what I recommend is 2 shows a month on average. So for that, if you think about it, you're getting on 24 shows over the course of a year. Your business is going to look radically different at the end of that year than it did at the beginning. But that wasn't because you showed up to 1 interview. That wasn't because you showed up to 2 interviews. It was because you kept showing up over and over and over again. And I think that is so important to remember, is that this work is consistent. It's sustainable. It's not something that you're just going to do one time, have a massive hit, and then be done with it. And I think sometimes people come to me on discovery calls and they'll be like, yeah, I don't know. Like, I was just thinking maybe I could get on with like Amy Porterfield or like Jenna Kutcher. Like, that just seems like that would be the right audience for me. And I was like, no, like that's not where we start, right? That doesn't mean that you can't be on those shows. That doesn't mean that we can't help you get there, but there's a lot of other places that you got to show up before that. And so I think that it's important to remember that this type of work is the long game. And it's stuff that, like, trust me, I have people come to me that have heard me on podcast interviews 3 months ago, 6 months ago, 9 months ago, right? That is the type of stuff that is happening regularly. And that's a mindset shift that a lot of people need to have. It's not just like okay, I'm going to be on 1 podcast and then suddenly my business blows up.
You have to be practice almost as a guest, because I
don't recommend those big shows, especially when people are starting.
Right?
Like, not even ready. You're not even ready to be on.
Could you imagine like Amy Porterfield's about to ask you quite like the panic involved? Yeah. You would just be sweating visibly at that point. Exactly. So I have no idea what I'm doing. My first interview is Amy Porterfield. Like, that seems a little bit crazy. Yeah. And then, like, just getting over that panic. Like, there's been a bunch of my friends who've been on here over the years, and I've basically just made them do it because I was like, you need to start doing this. And you like, come on my show. I'll be nice to you. You can trust me. Right. Like, there will be no gotcha questions. I will not I will not mess you up.
Which, by the way, doesn't really happen anyways. So I want people to also know, like, the gotcha questions are not really a thing. Like,
this is not CNN.
In this world, don't worry about it. Yeah.
Anderson Cooper is not trying to catch you in a lie. Like, we're all working together to make all our businesses better.
Exactly.
Right? Like, I'm not, unless you're on TMZ, it does not serve you in some way to like make your big ass look bad.
Exactly. 100%. I can't think of a single host I've ever worked with that I thought wasn't just trying to make the best content they could for their audience. Yeah.
Right. Like I want to make you happy and calm and we're going to be great. And yeah,
Exactly.
totally.
Exactly.
So let's get into what makes good pitches, bad pitches, because
you're going to have some good insight into this too, as I get into this. I know, because you get a lot of,
I get some pitches that are that, yeah.
Yeah. I think that, I'll say this, about 95% of the pitches that get sent out into the world are shit. And I think that that's really, really important for y'all to know, because when you send a good pitch, it really stands out. And so I think that that's the reason that I'm kind of giving you that information and giving you that stat is because that's not to make you feel like, oh my God, I wouldn't be able to send a good pitch. No, you can send a good pitch. And when you do send a good pitch, it gets noticed, right? Like Kelly got a lot of pitches and she chose me. She accepted me as a guest on the show. And that's because of the quality of the pitch that was sent to her. And so there's multiple things that I kind of look at when I'm kind of crafting a pitch or what I think is going to be a really great pitch. And the first thing is you got to come up with some great topic ideas. So a lot of times I think when people pitch, they kind of think, in their perspective, they think they're making it easier for a host by just telling them, hey, I'm an expert in XYZ, right? Like, hey, I'm an expert in branding and in sales and in customer retention, right? That's great that you are, but that is more work for the host to then have to think about what you guys are going to actually talk about. Okay.
Yes.
So you want to make sure that, and look, this goes way back to my journalism days at Oregon State University. Like, you are trying to get to the yes. You are trying to make it as easy as possible for that host to look at your pitch and be like, oh yeah, that topic would do really great with my audience. Yes, absolutely. Let's do it. And so I think that is a huge thing for you to remember, is that you need to come with topics that are relevant for their audience. Usually just 2 or 3. I'm not saying you have to have a laundry list of things that you're sending them. Send them 2 or 3 really solid topic ideas. And that's going to make it so much easier. I would say 9.9 times out of 10, a host is choosing a topic that we send them. Even if it gets altered a little bit during the interview or whatever, that's completely fine. But your job is to get it to where their interest is piqued and they know that their audience is going to benefit from it. Just a side note to that, you do not have to send hosts different topics. So what I mean by that is a lot of people ask me that. They'll be like, well, do I need to be sending different topics to every host? No. Okay. You can definitely be sending, this isn't like a newspaper where someone's trying to get a scoop and like it's happening the next day and da 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 da. When we work with our podcast, we're typically booking weeks, if not months in advance, right? So that's okay to be sending the same topics to more than one host. All right. Like you right now, the reason you're on podcasts the reason you're on podcasts is to solidify yourself as an expert. So you do want to be talking about generally the same things over and over and over again. Right. So it is totally okay to send the same topics. But you have to have topics. Okay. So that's definitely a big thing. And I don't know if you want to jump in here for you, if that's been something that's you've seen.
Oh yeah.
Makes a difference. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, when we have like an Airtable thing, it comes in as a form. So I can like kind of look through the thing, and I'm a coach. I do this. And I'm like, great. But there's like 5 people who've said the same thing. And I have and maybe they have a really unique point of view, but I have no idea.
Yeah.
And I don't know, like, I don't want to have to, the worst thing being an interviewer is having to drag someone through an interview.
Yes.
So if they already say, okay, this is what I want to talk about, and I go, that sounds fascinating, I would love to hear about it, then I genuinely want to hear about things that are interesting, because it's so much easier to ask questions.
Yep.
It's not a list of 30 questions that I have to go through. It's a much more conversational. Like, okay, so tell me more about that. I want to hear about this. And I will tend to book people that have things that I'm like, I want to learn about that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, you know what I mean? If there is just, I'm a coach and I love working with entrepreneurs, I'm like, well, I don't know what to talk about now. Now I have to create.
Exactly.
And that's exhausting.
It's exhausting.
When you're doing so many.
It's not going to get you to the yes. You know, you see that on a Airtable, on your form come through, you're going to be like, no, like there's been 5 other people this week that have said the exact same thing. And, that is not going to do it. So I think the topics are super important. The other thing that I really, really think is important is personalization. what I mean by that is when we send a pitch via email, our first paragraph is all about that host, right? Something that we, not in like a stalker way, like, well, I see you live at 444 Main Street, like nothing like that. But, we do take a look at, a past episode and we listen to it. And, if not the whole thing, a majority of it. And it's something that we're genuinely interested in. I always say this to my publicist. I'm like, find an episode you're genuinely interested in listening to, and then listen to that one. And then we can give our, we can put in a little bit of something that we learned from it in there. And I think that that's really important for people to understand is like, hosts know if you've listened to their show or not, right? The second they get a pitch, they know, all right, this person has actually taken the time to do a little bit of research, or this person is just what we call spray and pray. So they're just sending a whole bunch of things and hoping that some of them land, right? And so you getting a little bit of personalization in there is going to make all the difference when you send that pitch. Using their first name. I know that seems really, really like you're like, yeah, obviously, but you wouldn't believe the number of hosts that I have that tell me like they get pitches that are just like, hey, host, or hey,
podcast
whatever.
Manager.
Hey, podcast manager, like, let's do, I really loved your last episode, period, into why they should be on the show. And that is not how this really works. Okay. You need to be using the first name of the host. If you know the name of the podcast manager, absolutely, you can put that in there, but using the name of the host is always fine, right? So I could be like, hey, Kelly, da, da, da. You can find this in podcast, Spotify. It's literally right under the name of the show. It's not like, it's not something that you're going to have to do a bunch of research on. Just take those extra 30 seconds and do it. And then really get into, like I said, a couple sentences on something you genuinely connected with, whether that was something from their podcast, whether it was something that you saw on social media of theirs, whatever the reason, just give some knowledge that, hey, I've looked at this. Like, this isn't just me sending a ton of emails. I'm sending you something because I genuinely think that I would be a good fit to be on your show.
Yeah. And I think that's the important thing, is like to be on this show. A lot of people, I get a lot of weird podcast pitches and I'm like, do they know what show this is? Like,
the answer is
that
no.
has like a weird take on something, because business is weird, right? Like there's a lot of things there's a whole bunch of different topics that I've been doing interviews on lately that you'd be like, that's not included. But there was a spin on it that I was like, oh no, that totally applies here.
Totally.
So if you have a weird thing, show how it applies here, because otherwise I'm like,
why would
I don't even want to say the most ridiculous things, because if they're listening, I don't want them to feel bad, but like so ridiculous. And I'm like, I don't know how this has anything to do with anything that we do.
Yeah.
And we're pretty broad in like helping people be more profitable. Like it's a pretty broad world out here,
This is pretty much it. Yeah.
Yeah. But like, that, like, give me a topic, tell me how it relates. And then I'm like, oh, all right, that I can see that. Great.
Yeah, that makes sense. Let's do that. And I think I love that point, because it's just so true. Like, you have to make sure that it works for that particular person, right? Like, we have a client that, really focuses on like lunar cycles and stuff like that, but it does go along with how people work in their business. So we have to make that connection, right? Like, we can't just be like, oh, so-and-so specializes in lunar cycles, so you should have them on your show, when it's a business show and they're like, how does that apply to like what I do? We have to make sure that we're explaining both in the beginning and then in our topics why that would make sense for their show, right? So I love that point that you just made. I think it's so true. Like, make sure you're connecting the dots for them.
Yes, because I have a podcast I have to put out every week. And we have been doing, over the last few months, we've been doing a lot more interviews. So there's a lot more of that kind of work to do, of trying to figure out, how does this fit in? When should I put them on? Like, how does this fit in the flow? What are we going to talk about? You know, like if you've connected those kind of dots for me, it's so much easier to say yes. I know it's going to be a lot less stress for me on like this side.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
So tell me about some of the missteps here. What are the big missteps
that people make? Yeah, absolutely. I think a big one that people make is they're worried about messing up, and so they don't even do it. And what I mean by that is, that could mean in regards to sending a pitch. That could mean in regards to, you're worried about messing up as an actual guest. There's multiple places where I think people let their imposter syndrome kind of get up in their head, right? Or that fear of rejection and stuff like that. And the thing to know is, you're going to get no's. Okay. So just know that going into it. I wish we had 100% acceptance rate of our pitches that we had sent, but that is not the case. Okay. We get no's, we get ghosted. All those things happen. So just know from the get-go that type of stuff is going to happen. It has no reflection on you. All right. Most of the time, there's a million other reasons why a host isn't able to have you on the show. And most of the time, if you send a solid pitch, it has nothing to do with you. Okay. So just know that right off the bat. But the thing that I always like to ask people about when they're worried, preemptively worried about something, is I always like to ask, well, what do you think is the worst that can happen? Like, what do you think is the worst possible thing that could happen? We already spoke about this earlier. We touched on it. People say like, well, what if I say something wrong and I embarrass myself? Okay. Most of these interviews are not recorded live. All right. Meaning, and we've already had to do this today, Kelly and I, where I've had to stop again because I didn't have my do not disturb on. Okay. So know that this type of stuff happens and the hosts are okay. You're okay. Like we're saying, there's no kind of gotcha here. We just stop and we start again. Okay. And that's absolutely something that you can do as a guest as well. If you really mess up how you answered something, you can just say, hey, I'm sorry. Can you ask me that question again? I really feel like I didn't answer it in a good way. Right. Just answer it again. It's all good. Okay. So don't stress about that type of stuff. Again, people worry about it. People worry about all that type of thing, and they have their different things. And I totally get that. We all can have our little shit talker come on our shoulder every now and again and tell us that, we ain't worth shit and da, whatever. That the thing that I always like to say with that is like, I truly think, and I 100% believe this, that the worst thing that can happen is you do not put yourself out there, because your business will not grow if you are not getting in front of new people. That's just the fact of the matter. These opportunities don't fall in our lap. We do have, sometimes people get asked to be on podcasts. I definitely get asked to be on podcasts. It's wonderful when that happens, but it doesn't happen enough, right? Like for most people that could happen once, twice, 3 times, but it's not happening in that 2 times a month average, right? It's not happening. And even when they are asked to be on a show, they may not be the right audience for you, right? You might go on it because it's your buddy's show, XYZ, but it's not the right audience. So at that point, you can do it, but you can't really expect for it to do a lot in your business, right? So I think that it's super important to know that, like, in order to grow your business, you have to be visible. Any of these people that you see out here that you admire, how they run their business and stuff like that, if they are successful, I guarantee to you, they are visible. And I think that it's really, really important to remember that is like, you got to put yourself out there. Your first couple interviews, you're going to be nervous as hell. Like, it's true. You're going to be sweaty. You're going to listen back to them like a year later. You're going to be like, oh my God. Like, I listened back to my first interviews and I'm like, oh geez. And I've like been in this world for a long time. Right. So like, just know that we all, the first couple interviews are not going to be great. Right. But you're going to get more comfortable. You're going to feel better as you continue to get through it. Just like anything we do in our business, you're going to get better at it. You just have to start doing it. And again, like I said, I really think the worst that can happen is that you don't do it.
Agreed. Even if it's scary. And
it is scary. 100%. Yes.
Totally is. But you just kind of say, okay, well, I know it's going to be scary. I'm going to do it anyway, because what are you going to do? You're going to sit in your office. Like, people are not going to come knock on my office door to just throw money at me. Like, it doesn't, I mean, I've hoped for it, but it doesn't work.
Which would be weird if they were just in my house knocking on my door, right? But I would still take their money. Yeah.
But like, just come knock on the window, like, hey, I've got some cash for you. Like, you have to like go out and like speak to people and do that. The other thing is, every podcast has an editor, every single one.
Yep.
So if you mess up real big, I tell everyone that come on, if you mess up, you fall over your words, whatever. I do it all the time. We just go with it. I'm used to it now. But even if you just stop, take a breath, and we have a place to cut that out.
Yep.
That's it.
That's it. No stress.
You will not die.
Yeah. Nope. You will not die. Your business will not die. You will not die. None of these things are going to happen. And like I said, you just got to get out there. You got to be doing this stuff and getting in front of new people if you ever expect your business to grow. And the term that I heard this year that I've kind of adopted into my business, and I actually just did a Instagram live on this, a lot of people were commenting on, was, I call it the visionary KPI. And what that means is, how many times are you getting out in front of people and talking about the mission of your business, what it is that you do? Okay. And the person that I learned this from and I agree with her recommendation because it's a challenge, but doable, is 1 time a week. You are getting in front of new people to talk about your business. Now that could be a podcast interview, but that could also be a summit talk. That could be you even having a one-on-one strategic lunch. It doesn't have to be like a big thing, right? But just getting out in front of people, talking about what it is that you do, because as the owner of a business, and especially I know that you have people listening that are the owner of agencies, you are the one that can do that. There's no one else in your business that can do that for you. So by having that goal of 1 time a week, I'm going to be out in front of people talking about my business. I think that, again, it's a challenge, but it's doable, and you will get more comfortable as you go through it.
It's totally practice. When I first started this, I wanted to throw up every time I thought of recording. Like I didn't want to record anything. I didn't want to be on video. I was freaked out. Now, like we record this, I'm on YouTube, I'm clips over here, I'm going live, like all the things, and it's just fine.
Yeah.
I mean, do I still get a little nervous? Of course, because I'm going to trip over my words or something like that, but whatever. I've never died. Still here.
Still here, still going strong. And so I definitely think that that's a big misstep that people make, is just, being nervous about it, which is okay to be nervous, but letting that fear cause them from essentially paralyzing them to doing anything.
Yeah. It's really just practice. Like I wanted to throw up the whole time. I still do sometimes, like if I have to get on a live, I still want to throw up a little bit. But that's okay. Like it's kind of the whole thing. Like people will be like, oh, I'm not like you. You're outgoing. And I'm like, I get just as nervous as everybody else. Yeah. Like it is what it is. You just have to try it. And that's why I force my friends to be on this podcast.
Yeah, exactly. And I love that. You got to. Another misstep that I see for people is just underestimating the time it's going to take to pitch themselves onto podcasts. I know you kind of talked about this earlier, lacking the time to do it is, I think people think it's going to be easy, right? Like they're like, oh, I'm just going to, no, I'll just send some pitches. And obviously like I'll get yeses and then I'll just be on shows. And I will say that pitching podcasts, the kind of podcast you actually want to be on, take time. You have to be doing that research. You have to be making sure that is, again, the right audience for you, the right fit for you, all that type of good stuff. And, I just think that I actually had someone send me a voice message the other day on Instagram, and she was like, I need you because I tried doing this myself last year and oh my God, and I get that. I know that feeling. I understand that feeling of like, well, I'll just do this, because I'll tell you right now, you can do it. You can pitch yourself to be on podcasts at a high level, like no question. That's something that every single person that's listening to the show can do. It's just a matter of having the time to be able to do that. When we work with our clients, we're working with them, over the course of multiple months, but well over 100 hours, 150 hours, et cetera, that we're working on that client. So think about that in regards to, okay, if that's like a 2 hour per month and that's them doing it, like, what's that going to look like for me? And for some people, they're okay with they have a VA that does it, right? Or they have, they do schedule time in once a quarter or once a month or whatever to do that work. That's great. If you can find the time to do that work, I think it's awesome. But for most people that are sitting at businesses that are multiple 6 figures, stuff like that, you just don't have the time. I hire one of our publicists to do mine. One of our publicists does my outreach.
Yep.
You have to, you have to be able to have that time and understand what that's going to look like in order to be sustainably and consistently getting on shows.
Yeah. I feel like the podcast that I've been on, I was either asked to be on or I saw something and I was like, oh, that one sounds like I really want to be on that. And then I sat there and did the research and I got that one done.
Right.
But consistently working on that's an enormous amount of time. And that is why I haven't been. I've been working my own podcast a lot lately, but not being on others.
We'll hook you up.
I love it.
But no, I mean, for real, that's why we have all these clients. And a lot of times they're people that tried to do it. They were like, yeah, I'll just do this, or I'll have my VA do it or whatever. And then they come back to us and they're like, yeah, that didn't happen. Can you just do it? So, it absolutely, it's absolutely just something that takes time, and you just got to be ready for that.
And there's also like well, obviously it's not just time. It's not like you're just sitting there not knowing anything. It's also knowing how to get people in the right places. Like I've had people before try to help me, go find podcasts that maybe I should be on, like do that kind of legwork. And I come back and I look at the list and I'm like, meh, I don't think that you're like, I don't know why you would think that would be a good place, or, you know what I mean? So the fact that you guys understand how it works, I'm sure you have a very great process for like bringing people through it. Like that is very valuable, because otherwise you are just going, I don't know, that looks good. Maybe they'll try
we
that.
have that, and we obviously have a process that we go through, but also we have a lot of contacts. Like we've worked with over 350 shows at this point. So for us, and a lot of those shows we've worked with them, as long as it made sense for the clients, perhaps multiple times. And they like working with us because they know it's going to be really efficient. We know what to get them. We know what we're doing, et cetera. And we actually have multiple clients that were hosts that we pitched to, that got the pitch and we're like, whoa, like, how do we work with you guys? Because this is different than like the other pitches that we get, And so we do have a lot of things in our favor, but I also like to say to people, like, if you have the ability to do it, you can do this. If you're at the beginnings of your business, you might have the time to do this, and don't wait. Do it now. Do it at the beginnings of your business. As long as you have something to drive people to, like, you should be doing this work.
And don't wait to feel like an expert, because I got to tell you,
100%. Yes.
You're never going to feel like an expert.
That's a great misstep to mention. People not feeling like again, that's that imposter syndrome, not feeling like they're ready, or they are who someone would want to have on their show. I love that you said that, because it's so true. You are ready.
Yeah, I've been doing systems for I don't even know how many years. I did them in corporate and Wall Street. I talk about them all day here. And I still am like, oh, I don't know if I can talk about systems on a podcast. Like, what? Seriously? Like, I still am like, nope, I don't know enough. I don't know if I can go on there and talk.
We'll get through that. We'll get through that. Yes.
Like your brain does a lot of funny things when your
brain will mess with you for sure at any chance that it possibly can. And we actually I've had a client before say to me, like, part of the reason I hired you was because once I know you got me on podcast, I had to show up. Like I couldn't.
Yes.
I couldn't do these things because I couldn't
back out.
I've paid you to do this work. So if I'm not there, like, then that's like,
that's brilliant. That is like if that's the best, like, checks and balances ever for yourself.
Yeah. Like she was like, I invested this money, so like, I've got to show up to these friggin' interviews. Like this is what I got to do, And I would venture to say this is the only client that's told me that, but I guarantee to you there's other clients that probably feel the same way. They were like, if this has been done and this is what I've hired them to do, like, I got to be there. I can't just cancel it. I can't just whatever because I'm feeling a little nervous or I'm feeling, whatever. Like, we'll help coach you through that. We're there to talk with our clients about that stuff if they need it. Once they've done an interview or two, they're usually fine. Though,
it's the unknown.
They're like, oh, okay, now I feel more comfortable with this. Now I feel more familiar with it. But it's so true. Like, you got to do the work, you got to do the pitching, but you got to show up for the interview, and do that and be there and be present and be ready to drop all that knowledge.
And remember, like, you can use this for content. Like, you're going to share it places. So many people are like, I don't know what to post. I don't have enough content. Like, this podcast gives me so much content. I take clips out of here. I post them on like the video clips on LinkedIn. I put them over here. I take that, like, all of that kind of stuff.
Yep.
And then someone else is also helping you share too. So it's like double than you just sitting there on a Monday going, what the hell am I going to post this week?
Yep. I love that. And I think that that's such a good, we've talked about the content, but like, to get into specifics for our annual clients, we create content off their interviews on the back end, right? So of each interview that they do, they're going to get, I believe it's 4 audio snippets and 2 quote cards. Okay. So meaning, like, when you see like a little quote, right, that someone said as like an Instagram post or whatever. So like a couple brilliant nuggets that they dropped during the interview, we're going to pull out from that and put that on a thing. So that right there from that one interview is 6 posts, right? Like, ready to go. So think about doing that 24 times. Think about doing that, all those times. That's a ton of content that's going to be there. We also create a blog post off of each interview as well. And that's something that I really, really recommend for people, because that ups your SEO like crazy. When you put that blog post up, and it doesn't have to be big. I'm talking like 2 paragraphs. Like you just are like, I went on this show, we talked about, and you could have a VA easily do this, right? Like I went on this show, we talked about XYZ, you're linking to the show, you're linking to the host. Maybe you put a quote that you guys said or something like that in their show notes if you want, whatever. And then that is going to like up that SEO like crazy for you. When someone goes and types your name into Google, those blogs are going to come up. They're going to go into them. They're going to see, oh, wow, they were on a podcast. Trust me when I tell you that people are impressed by you being on podcasts. Okay. Like that is a huge credibility marker to people. So people that are thinking about working with you, even if they don't go listen to it, even if they don't go listen
just
to
that it's there.
It's just that it's there. They're like, oh, dang, they've been on like all these different shows. Oh, that's cool. They must really know what they're talking about. You might think that I'm just saying that, but you guys, that seriously happens. That's why people pay a lot of money to get a logo. Like that's why they pay a lot of money to be in a magazine, right? So they can slap that logo on their website. And it's the same thing with podcasts. Although I never recommend you pay to play for podcasts, and I can get into that if you want me to get on my soapbox. But the point of that is that the logos and the things like that are huge credibility markers for your potential clients.
It seems like you are a real business, right? Like you're really doing things.
Person.
You're not just, you didn't just put up a one-page website and say, I'm a business. Like people, you have talked to people in the real world about things. Like it makes you, And like on the content thing, like the fact that like you need help getting content made, and maybe you have a VA or maybe you have a social media person, and you always are worried about hearing your voice. Like it's sounding like you when you create these things. Well, if they have 45 minutes of you talking, it is your voice. They're not having to figure out what you might want to say about this. Like they're basically pulling from what you've said instead. And it's content that is so you, because it is you.
It is you, legit.
Instead of like some VA making up shit all day. Which, you know, like I've had people try to help me and I'm like, that doesn't sound like anything I would say.
I feel like that's not it right there.
No,
that's not me. I think that it's so true of like an audio snip. That's you.
Yeah.
That's you talking. That's you saying what you say. And, you know, we call it like content mining, but like, that's what you essentially then have your VA do, right? Is you have them kind of content mine the podcast interview that you're on and be like, hey, I want 4 1-minute snippets from this. I want 2 quotes from this, whatever. And they can do that, right? That could be something that you're just having as part of their job that they do. And if you do that, I truly think that you're doing more than most people do when it comes to using their podcast interviews. That's why we've added it onto our annual plan, honestly, is like, I got so sick of people not using their stuff over and over that I was like, fine, we're just going to do it. And so I think that, you know, if you're doing that work, like it's going to go a long way. Like it is all good. And every time tag that host, they're going to get that ping reminding them, oh yeah. Christina was on my show. I loved having her on the show. They might even come back to you and say, hey, do you want to do a second round? Do you want to come on again and talk about XYZ? Trust me, that happens. I have been a guest on many shows, more time than one. And as long as it's the right audience, that is fantastic. You know, to be able to be getting out in front of people again, new people, and even the same people that might have heard me before, but are going to hear from me one more time.
It's also helpful if someone else is helping you, if you're pulling quotes, because it's really hard to be like, I was so brilliant when I said this. I can't do it myself at all. Yeah. Because you're like, you feel like a really cocky jerk. You're like, oh, this was brilliant. I should put this up on a plaque. You know what I mean?
I love that. Yeah. I mean, like that is the beauty of having someone else do it. And that's a great VA task. That's a great thing to have someone do, is just be like, I want you to listen to this. And then I want you to pull these things from it and write a blog post. And maybe they'll write you an e-newsletter blurb about it too. And you get all that from one podcast interview.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. And then you have content to go talk to people, and then your business grows and you get more profit and money. It's amazing, right?
That's how it works. Like that's the beauty of the podcast. Again, like I said, it's not the day it airs you suddenly have a ton of people coming and buying from you. It's the using it over and over again in your own marketing, and you know, just kind of putting yourself in front of people again and again.
Well, this has been a fantastic conversation. I've learned a lot. I thank you so much for coming on today,
Thank
Christina.
you for having me.
Yeah. Like I love talking about this stuff because some of the things are you're like, I don't understand why you're pitching me like this. So listen to her, people, if you are going to pitch me. Give me some good ideas.
In the hot tips, yeah, for everybody.
I wish I
Yeah,
could think of anything off the top of my head because some are amazing.
yeah,
We'll have a blooper reel on that one day.
yeah.
But let's
I've
tell.
actually seen hosts do that before. Of course, they take out the name and stuff like that of like whoever's pitching and stuff like that, but they'll like literally post like even if it's just like a paragraph from it, but they'll be like, they'll be like,
What happened here?
yeah, what happened here? This was not meant for me, etc. Yeah.
And I'm always like, how? And then I'm sitting here going, how do you think this would work? Like,
Yeah.
and then like a whole story comes into my head. That's no,
And
don't do that.
Also think what I think when I hear about that stuff is like, what about the shows that do say yes? Are those are those then the shows that's who you're really gonna go? Like, do you think that's really valid? Like really worth your time? I don't know. Like I have like I feel like it's kind of both ways, even at that point. Like I'm like, is that the host that you really want to be talking to? And then conversely, like, yeah, I don't know. There's just a lot of stuff going on in that whole.
Yeah, like as a business person, am I going to spend the time doing something that has nothing to do with my business?
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Like I'm always too busy over here as it is. So,
right.
like I've had other people ask me to be on their shows or podcasts or whatever. And I'm like, you have like, I love you. And if you want me to like just chat as friends, great. But like, they're like, do you want to come on to talk about this? I'm like, I have no interest in talk. Like it has nothing to do with my business.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
And, like, let's just talk about something fun.
Yeah. And to be fair, like if you want to do that, like people that are like, that's great. If you just want to go on your friend's podcast and talk about like stuff that you guys want to talk about, all good. But do not expect it to move the needle in your business, because that is what I hear from people over and over again is like, they'll be like, oh, I was on a podcast, but it didn't do anything.
Yes. And they're like, okay, so it didn't work. And that's it. I'm not going to do it.
They're like, that podcasting doesn't work. And I'm like, okay, so we were on one show, like maybe 2 shows that you were asked to be on. I was like, was it the right audience? We're like, well, it was just my friend's show. And I'm like, well, how can you expect that to do anything in your business? Like, it's not just go on any podcast and have your business grow. It's, you need to be strategically thinking about what shows make the most sense for you to be on.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And how can everyone find you so that you can help them get good podcasts?
Yes, get on there. So the best way to kind of figure out what might be the next move for you is to head to podcastpublicityquiz.com. And that is a really fun interactive quiz that I do that kind of tells people like what might make the most sense for you based on where you are in your business. And one of those things might be, learning to do it yourself. One of those might be you want to have a team member do it. We have a VIP day. And then also there's our podcast pitch broker program, which is where we do everything for our clients. So all they have to do is what we call show up and shine, come drop their amazing knowledge and, then be done. And so those are kind of the different options that we have. And we just love, working with entrepreneurs and getting those voices out there in any way that we can.
That sounds amazing. All right. Well, it was fantastic to talk to you today.
Thank you. So fun.
And thank you. And we will see everyone else next week. Thank you so much for joining me this week. If you have an agency or want to create one, come join my Facebook community, Get Your Agency Together, where we talk all the things growing and scaling your agency. For show notes and more info on all the things, head over to reynoldsobm.com. Follow me on Instagram and Facebook at ReynoldsOBM. And finally, if you enjoy this podcast, I would love for you to give us a review on iTunes.